What we want to talk about this morning is the fact that a lot of times in our organizations we have traditionally thought of security in maybe a castle type layered environment. When we think about castles, they had the moat, the drawbridge, strong walls, they had turrets, watchmen, all of those different layers were part of your security. And so traditionally as security guys and as technology providers like JMark, we come in, we tell you, you need all these layers of security. And we keep asking you to add maybe to that as we notice things in the marketplace changing or the different threats to your organization changing. And so we continually add those securities. But oftentimes we don't really talk about the human layer like we should. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is the fact that, yeah, we can have all these technology layers, but there's still that weak link of our employees. One little mistake by them, and it can cost our organization considerably. And so when we think about that aspect, maybe you might think back to that castle and the fact that if the watchman looks out, he sees the king coming, or who he thinks is, what's he going to do? He's going to open the doors up to the castle, drop the drawbridge, let the king in, but what if it isn't? And that's really what we're talking about too, is the fact that when we talk about social engineering, it's someone that's trying to deceive your employee or your user into thinking that they should be doing something, and then they basically open the doors to the castle and let them in. So what can we do to help train them, help them to understand how dangerous that is? Another aspect of this to think about too is we've got our organization, we've got all these layers of security around it, but now where have we moved our data? Oftentimes it's to the cloud now. Office 365, Google for email, one of those two is commonly used. And then also when we talk to our organizations, a lot of them have moved some of their main vendors, their core systems in their organization. They're now relying on their vendor to provide the servers and the back end. And all of their data is sitting in a data center somewhere else that they don't manage. So now you don't know the perimeter that's put around that. You don't know what layers they have protecting your data. Not only that, it means that anywhere in the world usually, that portal will be available. So if your employee, again the human layer, gives out their credentials to someone else, now anywhere in the world, that portal can be logged into. Your data is far more exposed. And so it's that much more important that you understand the aspect of the human layer. Let me try and at least get to the point where I can show you the slides as we go here. So next we'll talk about social engineering and really why that's so effective and why is it that the human is so weak at the same point. And social engineering isn't anything new. Maybe we watched Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio. You know, he showed exactly what the Frank Abagnale did for social engineering. He could get in anywhere, he could do whatever he wanted, he could do it just by tricking users. But why is it that even today, so many years later, it still works? I like this quote that one of our vendors used the other day, that there's no natural instinctive aversion to cyber danger. If you were in Hawaii right now and you're standing there and a fissure of lava spewed up in front of you 40 feet, what's your natural reaction? You're gonna run. But we get on the internet, we're Googling whatever, we see a link. Is there any natural instinct to run? That's a bad link? There isn't. So that's one of the big reasons why this is so critical. Another reason is because of all social media. When you think about your website, you probably list your management, you list their title, their name, their email address maybe, you list where they used to work, what industries they've been in before, a lot of details about them. Their LinkedIn account then, you follow their name over there. Now you see where they went to school at. You see some of their activities or what they've been looking at and posting. Then you tie that into Facebook and other social media platforms and you have a trove of information. And that's what the social engineer loves to have. The more info they know about someone, then the easier it is to trick them. The easier it is to make them feel comfortable with you, and then they're going to be able to fall victim to those. Another big aspect, another reason that social engineering is so effective and just continues to be more so in today's society is the fact that business are trying to increase efficiency constantly. And so some of those buzzwords that we see, doing more with less, So oftentimes our employees now have more on their plate that they're trying to juggle. But the more you multitask, the less you'll do those 3 words there. Stop, look at what you're about to do, and think about it. That's 3 keys from one of the vendors that we work with, YesNo Before, quite a bit. Stop, look, and think. If you're multitasking and you got a million things to do though, and you get this one email, you just reply quick. You don't even think twice, and that's the problem. That's where it can happen. You just click a link, don't even think about it, and suddenly you now have an issue. The 2 main things, there's a lot of things that can happen because of social engineering, but the 2 that we see the most are those 2 right there. They're trying to get you to go to a fake web page where you'll put in your credentials, and now they have credentials to log into any of your cloud-based systems, maybe your VPN or other systems that you have available on the internet as well. The other one there is that they'll get you to download a file on your machine. That file then will have some sort of malware on it, and ransomware is the big one that we keep hearing about in the news and will continue to hear about as it morphs and changes on exactly how they make that be effective. But it usually starts, almost always, by someone clicking a link in an email. When it comes to either one of those incidents happening, whether they've compromised credentials, whether they've gotten ransomware or some sort of malware on your system or on your network, you have to deal with these things. You have to deal with the loss of productivity that happens, the time that's spent investigating what happened, how did this get into my organization, what do I need to do to clean up that mess? But then there's a lot of hidden dangers. Those are the ones in orange there. The fact that your reputation has a hit. That's hard to really quantify on how big of an impact that had to your organization. How long will that impact your organization? How will that impact your fees, possibly with your insurance carriers as well? Who's under PCI? Would you raise your hand? So we've got a few for PCI. How about HIPAA? Quite a few there too. And then banking, financial sector. So then you also realize the impact that you have financially possibly because of these events. FBI, yeah. You can go down a long list of fines or fees that might be assessed after the fact if you're found to be that you were negligent in those situations. Oftentimes, the customers that we work with at JMark are small, medium size. They think of what they hear in the news as mainly the targets, the cities, the big companies. But this slide really shows that small organizations you need to worry too. Because if you look there, 44% of small businesses have had a cyber attack. And it's cost them $9,000 to clean up from that. This stat of 95% was interesting to me because we hear credit card breaches all the time. If you were watching the news recently, it was Chili's just had their POS system had malware on it, and so credit cards used in the last couple months, they're concerned about those, and they're still investigating that situation. So we think of those bigger organizations, but 95% of what Visa investigates, the credit card fraud comes from small businesses. They're the ones that have lost the credit cards or had an incident. We talked about ransomware earlier. This just shows you why it's such an impact to your organization today, something that you need to be worried about, because when you look from 2015 to 2016, that was when it really took off. It really got its start, and it hasn't stopped. We might not hear about it in the news as often, but Atlanta was just in the news not too long ago. The city of Atlanta was impacted very significantly by ransomware. The impact, this slide shows that 70% of the people have actually paid $10,000 to $40,000 to try and get some of their data back. And oftentimes organizations are stuck with that dilemma. Do I pay the ransom, or do I go through the time and effort maybe to bring my backups back? Or suddenly they realize that what they thought for secure and good backups actually had issues, and so they end up trying to pay in that situation as well. And then as we switch gears here a little bit, we're going to look at some of the most common ways that we see that this type of social engineering is happening. Obviously, email is going to be one of those, but let's talk about 2 others first. And the reason I put pop-ups up, this is something that we probably remember from quite a few years back. It was always the fake antivirus, was always in front of our users. they'd have that pop up, and then they'd end up installing some sort of software that actually slowed their computer down more than helping it. Well, last year we saw an uptick in this. This happened again, where there was quite a bit of the pop-ups that were occurring as well. So that's something that your users need to be aware of. And this is kind of a prediction for what's probably coming. You're probably having it on your cell phone already, where you're getting calls that say, you need to call us back immediately because the FBI is going to start investigating you for tax fraud tomorrow. Or you need to call us because your student loans can be forgiven. And you're like, I don't have student loans. But a lot of people they call do. Or your credit card, they want to give you a better interest rate, whatever it is. I hit one to talk to someone the other day on one that I got and followed it through, and he asked me for my, he said, is the credit card you have, is it MasterCard or Visa? I said it was MasterCard. He goes, does it start with a 5 in front of it, the one that you have in front of you? It's like, yeah. Well, all of them do. But he was trying to get me to feel comfortable with him. Yeah, he must be from my credit card company. And then shortly after, he wanted me to verify my number and read it off to him. So that's about where he got mad at me. And then phishing. That's what we hear over and over again, is how impactful phishing is. I want you to look at the title of this slide, though, first, because that's what should really concern you, is we've got phishing, then spear phishing, then whaling. If you're familiar with those terms, phishing, we started with the ones that were pretty easy to spot. Your Nigerian relative with millions of dollars just needed a couple grand from you, and it was all spelled wrong, and it was easy to spot those, right? But then phishing got to the point where they're using real logos from different websites. They're using English that's the grammar is perfect on it. But then spear phishing, they get to where they're looking at your organization. We talked about social media. It doesn't take them very long to figure out who they can target and what topics that person will be most interested in. So then now they're targeting you. Just a few minutes of research on your organization. Whaling, though, is targeting your C-suite. They're looking at those individuals specifically, learning as much as they can about them, and then figuring out how to have a relationship with them via email until they're comfortable, and then they'll divulge information from your organization. So the fact that phishing just keeps taking another iteration is what you want to take back from that. That it's so important to remember that this just keeps evolving and getting better. Sometimes you'll talk to someone and they're like, oh, I can spot a phishing email, no problem. If you feel that way, that's a problem. You can't feel that way. You can't be confident. No one in your organization should feel confident. So they might look like they're from a C-level. That's the W-2 fraud or the wire transfer fraud that you hear a lot, is where someone's sitting at their email and they get an email from the CEO or the CFO or COO, whoever it is, says, I need W-2s right away, or I need this wire transfer completed. I'm in a meeting, please don't bother me, but I need it done by noon. Please get it done. And they're just trying to make them happy, trying not to get in trouble by missing a deadline, and so they're not verifying. Well, in these cases, these organizations have lost millions. Ubiquity, 40 million. Google and Facebook lost 100 million, where they wire transferred to another organization. You think they would know their procedures, right? But even these large organizations were able to get phished or social engineered. On the right-hand side, Snapchat, Seagate, Polycom are some of the big names that have had the W-2 incidents, where they've actually emailed a whole bunch of W-2s to someone, to a social engineer. In the case of Seagate, it was everyone that worked for them that year. That would have been a massive impact to their organization as they're trying to clean up that mess. If we go back here for just a second, another couple ways that you'll see these phishing emails come in is ones that look like they're from a customer and they say, hey, this invoice you sent me is wrong, and they'll have an attachment that'll have malware. They'll look like they come from a vendor. The most common one that we continue to see is ones that say that you need to change your password on Office 365, or you need to log in and download a shared file, and you click the link and it immediately takes you to a login page that is an exact mirror of Office 365 login. They enter their credentials not even thinking, but it's a fake page, and now shortly afterwards someone else logs into their account, starts sending spam, downloads their mailbox, whatever's sensitive in their email, and now you have your data loss. This statistic is concerning too. 91% of data breaches start with spear phishing. So as we move into really focusing on how you train your users, that's the area that you want to focus on, is spear phishing. That's where the impact is going to be to your organization. If 91% of these attacks, that's how it gets started. So we'll take a look at a few of these examples that I have. And this is kind of where we see things started. This one isn't really grammatically wrong, but imagine someone that's working at your organization, they're having difficulty buying everything for school getting started. That gets expensive. You get 3 or 4 kids and you're having to buy new clothes and everything. So if they all of a sudden get an email, a coupon that says you can get 50% off or $50, what was this one, a $100 voucher for $50, they're going to be tempted. And if they're moving fast, they won't even think twice. But then as we look in here, we've probably gotten the LinkedIn fake ones where we don't know this person. If we look at this, it comes from linkedinmessaging.com, not linkedin.com. It's not someone that we know. If you hover over the link, it's not going to take you to linkedin.com by hitting the accept button either. And that'll take you where it has you put in your LinkedIn credentials to a fake website. This is similar to some of the ones that we see the most with the password changes. What do you spot on that one that would be your red flag? What would help you to know that that was not legitimate?
24 hours.
The immediate. Take that action right away. That's one of the most common things that we need to do this now, the wire transfer. I need this done before I'm out of this meeting. Anything else you spot? Would have been better if it was bigger. So some of the things that your users need to know is who normally sends these types of emails in your organization. Does it normally come from it@jmark.com? What's the normal flow that happens? Now, if a good social engineer will know that flow and try and mimic it as well. So don't just totally rest on that. And then hovering, making sure your users know to hover over the links, see where they are going, and make sure that it actually matches where they think they should go. Even better, though, is to teach them just to go straight to the website that they supposedly received this email from. Go straight to LinkedIn. Go straight to Office 365 via their normal URL that they use and log in. And they should have the same exact messages that they would receive via email. But I want to show you a couple others here, too. This is one of the wire transfer type. And you'll see down here is first an email that happens. Are you at the office? I need this right away. She responds, yeah, I'm here. She doesn't catch that the email address was just a little bit wrong. But how do you think that affects someone if they're replying back and forth? Trust. Yep. They won't spot that as easy. Once she fell for it right here, she's gone. She's not thinking now. She thought she really had an email. We've seen customers before where they'll have emails, 3 or 4 of them, and then they'll just happen to run into the CEO or CFO in the building and be like, oh, I almost got that done for you. What done? You know, but they're confident they're talking to him. So those are particularly scary. How about this one? Why might this one work in your organization? Not now, but back when things were politically charged. Yeah. Any politically charged topic, anything that's being publicized by the media right then, it doesn't matter whether they're in agreement or disagreement here, does it? They just see something that's kind of shocking in their face, like, wow, did that really happen? It'll include what looked like a real Twitter tweet that happened, but it was pretty effective. This was a test that we had ran one day. And here's another one. Do you think this one would work in your organization, and why? Probably wouldn't work in everyone's, but any of you use a SurveyMonkey or any type of survey solution in your organization? Yeah. And if you would hover over that, it wouldn't really go to SurveyMonkey. But the thought that they get to have their input on the next party, think your employees might want to do that? They will want to. Any questions on this so far? And then we're going to go into 4 pieces that we can use to build our training program. Any thoughts? The first one we're going to talk about is policies and procedures. This is an aspect where we see varying degrees of how well organizations do with having policies. Some smaller organizations have never had to really have them, and they like it that way. Other organizations have gone to the extent where their policies are 5, 6, 7, 8 pages long. So the recommendation that we really have for you is that you keep things simple, but you need them. The reason you need them is because you have to have something to train against, first of all, before you even start your training program. And then you need something that your employee can refer back to, because they're not going to remember exactly what you said in your training. They need to go back to it and say, what is it that I was supposed to do in this situation? They can look back quick. But then it has to be simple. If it's 6 pages, they're not going to read that either, are they? It needs to be something very easy to read. And then I want you to think about the fact that when you're installing software, you go next, 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 and you get to that license agreement. How many read it? Nobody? We just click next, right? It's this big, long, legal jargon. Well, what if our policies are that way? They're not going to read it. So try and keep it simple, something that they can really read and understand easily. And explain why. Why is it that this policy is here? What are the dangers if I don't follow this policy to the organization? I've got 2 examples here that I wanted to mention, and I'll have to read these. But these were ones that we appreciated that were very simply read or written and easy to see the why. For instance, keep your laptop close to you and in sight. Otherwise, keep it locked away securely. It only takes a moment for a thief to walk away with your laptop. Pretty easy to understand, right? The why is, I don't want the thief to walk away with it. It only takes a moment, it says. And then this one refers to airports and how to handle your laptop. It said, beware of stage delays at security checkpoints. Many thieves use these tactics to steal laptops. Do not send your laptop through the screening device until you are about to pass through the checkpoint. Keep your laptop close to you at all times. So the why is, they typically stage these delays to steal your equipment. What to do? Keep it with you until you're ready to go through. I mean, very simple, easy to read. The shalls and all those type of words that sometimes get used can really be confusing to a user, and they're not going to understand and walk away from it and do anything with it. Next, we'll look at the actual content that you want to have in your program and exactly how you deliver that to your employees. How can you make that an effective training program? So we probably sat through ones that were pretty tough, especially after lunch, like right now. Sometimes it can be really hard to stay awake for them. You can get PowerPointed to death in some of these situations, and so you want to really be careful with how you design this program. To start with, though, we have that phrase again that we use. There's no natural, instinctive thing in us that says to run away from cyber danger. So you need to state even the very simple, don't share a password. That needs to be in your training so that they understand how important that is. And again, use in your training the why. What will happen if you do share your password? What could happen? How could you either get compromised, or how could another employee use it to defame you or use it in a bad way? And then, are you going to develop this content in-house, or are you going to outsource it out to someone else? If you do it in-house, there's some benefits because you can tailor it to your organization. You know what your business really has as dangers and threats. What have you seen in the last couple months that you need to focus on? So that's a benefit of in-house. But then, do you have people that are good at teaching and conveying that material? Do you have a good perspective on what's changing in the security landscape? So maybe that's some weaknesses to in-house. If you outsource it, they can have some cheesy content sometimes. So it can be hard to find something that your employees aren't laughing at through the whole thing and not really listening. It can also be very general and generic, where they're not really able to get something that they take away from it and can apply it the next day. But outsourced can also have some high quality content, and sometimes some of these different services, you have thousands of videos to choose. And so you can look and you can see which one it is that you think your organization can use. They also might have one that applies to your HR department. So then you can train your HR with just that video. And for that reason, outsourcing can be very beneficial for your organization as well. So maybe you want something that's hybrid. And that applies well because look at that last bullet point, to consider frequent short sessions, not that annual security training that we traditionally have done. If you do it annually, it's usually longer. That's where, in 6 months, how much has the security or the threats to your organization changed? How have hackers changed what they're targeting your organization with? So if you would do a shorter 20-minute session every 3 months, how could that benefit your employees? Would it be able to help them to stay engaged for those 20 minutes, not fall asleep, and help them to something that would change and evolve over what you've even seen in the last 3 months? You can tailor it each quarter that way. When you look at that with the in-house versus outsourced too, then maybe a couple of those are outsourced and a couple of them are something that you do in-house. And that way you can be trying to really have a good comprehensive training program. Here's some things that you want to make sure you cover. Passwords are still such a weak thing in our organizations. So if you use password manager tools, you need to train on how to use those effectively. If you don't, you just need to train on how to choose passwords securely, how to not just add a 1, 2, 3 at the end of the password every time they have to change it in 90 days. You need to do that with training and help them to appreciate why. When it comes to phishing too, make sure that that's a topic. What we just talked about, those 3 words: stop, look, think. Making sure they know that when they see an email every time, what are some things I need to look at on this email so that I know that it's safe for me to take action with this email? What are red flags that I should see in an email that tell me, no, this is probably not legitimate. This is probably a phishing email. Physical security is something that we sometimes forget as well to cover, and so make sure that you cover some aspect of physical security, however it applies to your organization. And we mentioned how effective W-2 and CEO fraud has been, so it would be important to have that as part of your training as well. And I forgot to mention back in the policy, that's something you want in there as well. You need policies that state how wire transfers are handled. Even if someone's in a meeting, we always do a phone call. It doesn't matter what kind of meeting it is, or we have some form of two-factor authentication there that we do before we would send W-2s or a wire transfer in any way, shape, or form. And then if you have that in your policy, make sure it's part of the training. And it may be that your whole organization doesn't need that part of the training, but there's certain individuals, and it can be a quick break room session. It wouldn't have to be a long training on some of these specific type of topics that apply to just a couple people in your organization. And the last piece we'll talk about then is how we test it. I guess it's not the last piece. But if you train, it can be a problem if you train and then you never test, because you don't know how effective that's been. And it can be challenging sometimes to know how to test, but there's a lot of different services that offer the option to come in and test. In some cases, they'll send people into your organization, they'll try and get in the front door. They'll say, hey, I'm working with so-and-so in IT and I need to get in your server room. Other cases, people dive in dumpsters, figure out what they can gather from your dumpster to learn about you, and then maybe use email later to follow up and try and social engineer that way. There's also services that just send phishing emails, and they'll be far cheaper, obviously, as well. But then you can test your users in that way. You need to think about who you're going to target, because not everyone in your organization wants to be trained or thinks they need training, and not everyone thinks they need to be tested either. But the ones that are most at risk are the ones that show up visibly on your website. or visibly in some other social media circumstances. So it's usually all of your management staff is out on your website, usually your marketing and media type contacts, any of those public addresses that are available, those individuals for sure, they should be part of the training and testing. The higher up in an organization someone is, the more they have in their email box that you don't want to lose. So make sure that your C-suite isn't trying to get out of some of these things. You have to emphasize to them the importance and the risk, that no one's immune to this. Another aspect when you are looking at different solutions that you can use, some of them will allow you to, if someone fails a test that you have sent to them, then they'll fall into a bucket where they get tested more frequently. And it'll even kick them into more training as well. And that can be the most effective. When you spot someone that you think is the one that is going to be a danger to your organization, that you can really then aggressively follow up and see if they're learning anything. Are they behaving better now? Are they protecting your organization more than they did before? This is a slide from YesNo Before, who we work with as one of our vendors, but they show really how your security program can go from just that PowerPoint. Well, actually, it starts with doing nothing, but they're really recommending you get up into the 4 and the 5 on this. And if you were in one of the sessions earlier today, he mentioned a human firewall. So that's really talking about the human layer that we talked about earlier. You're hoping that they act as another layer of security for you, that they understand what dangers to watch for in your organization, and they know what action to take, and they know how to alert you if they spot something that's dangerous. Lastly then, we're going to look at accountability. Because if you test them and they fail, you need to do something. And so which route will you take? How many today, when someone does fail a test, do you kind of publicly make that known? Does anyone do that? Some organizations are fans of that, and it's very public. And in certain circumstances, that might be fine, if depending on the culture of your organization. But in a lot of organizations, if you think about being a parent, it was never, positive reinforcement was always far better and more successful than always being negative and harping. And that's what I would recommend you think about as well, is how can you positively reinforce those that have done well? And maybe that's more public, so that others will try and live up to that as well. And so here at the bottom it says reward the good. Maybe you post the names of those who have been successful at passing your phishing tests in the last 6 months. Give them a little gift card if they have a stretch where they make it 6 tests without having an incident or failing that test. Another important aspect that I would mention is the private shaming part still needs to happen. And it doesn't have to be shaming so much, but it can be, however you want to do it. But the instant feedback, and the sooner you can do it towards when you tested them and they failed, the better. So if you had someone come into your organization and try and get in a server room and they let them, or if you had someone call your organization and say, hey, I'm with your IT company, can you go to this URL and type in your username and password and we'll get in and we need to check something for your controller or for someone in your organization. If they fail that test, then as quickly as you can, make sure that they know it, because it's in their mind. They can go back and replay the events and say, what is the red flag that I should have saw? What is it that I missed? And that'll help be a learning experience. In the case of some of the solutions that will automatically send these phishing tests, as soon as they click one, they can immediately be enrolled in additional training, so that's beneficial. But you can also pop up a big message on their computer that says you failed. And again, it's the same thing. You can go back and think, what is it that I just did? What should I have spotted in that email? Why was it that I didn't catch that one? And what's funny is when your C-suite has it happen to them. When they just registered a Starbucks card or something, and all of a sudden they get a Starbucks email out of the blue, and they click on it, and they realize, oh yeah, I was moving too fast again today. And then that's important for even them to realize, wait a second, no one is immune in the organization. Well, that is our recommendations from J. Mark. I welcome any questions that you have in regard to how to have an effective training program, if you have any. Yes. YesNo Before is a product solution that it has both training programs, videos that you can enroll users into, and it'll keep track of who's been through the training and who hasn't. It also can send phishing emails. So they have a whole large database based off of what they see in the security world, that they make these fake emails that try and trick your users. And you can go in there and choose a whole range of these to just send at random to all your users. If they click on one, it can automatically enroll them where they're tested twice as often, or they get one every day if you want it to. They can get enrolled in more training. It's one that we really like because of that. It can help feed that behavior right away, because it can splash that message up and say, hey, wait a second, you messed up here. And there's FishMe, there's a few other solutions too that are similar. It's not the only one out there. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Would you recommend taking more of a personal approach or more of a entire, if you're a small business, you don't have 500 people under you, would you recommend taking more of a personal approach? You get an email, you go do this training, or doing it as a group?
It would depend on your organization and what you think, but definitely certain departments in your organization, that might be really effective. Because we mentioned, if they're dealing with HIPAA, if they're dealing with PCI type documents, that's a different type of training sometimes. There's different points you want to cover. And so you may have a whole group, maybe if we're talking about quarterly training, those 20-minute sessions, a couple of those are the whole group together, but then a couple of them you break up into 3 sections that you can skim over some stuff for one, but then you deep dive into PCI on another. Does that help you?
Yeah,
A little bit? Is there any part I missed to that question?
Yeah, it was just different because I do the training with all the staff every month and go over like a certain subject, like phishing or whatnot. But we purchased them to YesNo Before, and they're more focused on, sending these items to these people and whatnot. So I didn't know, is there a wrong way to do this?
There's not a wrong way, but doing nothing, it would be the wrong way. So do something, and it sounds like monthly is awesome. And then you can tailor that. But another aspect that I never really touched on here is just how much you need your managers involved too. You need management and up to really understand how important this is, to understand that 91% of breaches are coming from spear phishing. So if they understand that, then they'll help you and they'll be on your side more. Because if it's the manager helping them, the employee that keeps failing to see why it's important, then that helps you too. It helps you get time with them if you want to do just a little team one-on-one.